He's a legend music industry. He's been on television and won Clash of the Choirs with Mpumalanga. He's been an Idol's judge. He's got hit songs that he created, Khatlalinna, and he wrote songs even for record-breaking albums that came out in our country. He's a producer, he's an entrepreneur, he's a tech entrepreneur, he's a father, he's a husband. He's an all-rounder who has really excelled within the music industry. Welcome to the For This Reason podcast, JR. Welcome back to the For This Reason podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment because this helps us reach more people. Now today I've got a masterclass. When was your first time where you thought, I'm big in the music industry?
My album, Khatlalinna, came out. The album, The Main Event, was a master recording owned by 37 Mpho.
Where does this begin? How do we wake up one morning and Amapiano is now big? What's the beginning point?
Innovation. That's the beginning point. When someone wants to continuously push themselves and try something new, that's the starting point.
What are some of the fundamentals that an artist would have to understand?
And I think artists need to learn the most important thing in that is...
I want you to take me back to the beginning of your journey. I mean, growing up in Bloemfontein, in Pretoria, how did that shape the man that you are today?
I think the having of both cultures and both Bopedi, which I'm a Mopedi, and then my mother being Xhosa Mosotho, if there is anything like that, kind of like opens you up to the different cultures, right, and different ways of what builds you to become who you are. And I think Pretoria had a big impact on me because of that. We were I went to school in the East and I stayed in the West, stayed in Entrepreneurial. So, just the ability to connect everything, and between there is town. So you're meeting guys from everywhere, whether it be Soshanguve, Mabopane, Centurion, Mamelodi, Eastland, Atteridgeville. You then meet in that melting pot of Central Pretoria. And that builds your character. You learn to start to network well. You learn to start to speak to people, operate, and run the room, and you become very assertive. But again, township is also got there's another subculture that exists that might not always support or hold in good standing people or kids who go to the suburbs and schools in the burbs and whatever, so you always have those labels, and what cheese boy, what, but that has to help you build the resilience. But also what that can do, and partially almost did for me, was that it then builds, not only does it make you resilient, but it also makes you a tad bit rebellious. Because what you then want to do is prove the status quo wrong. You always now want to prove that you're not, that you're as street as the other guy, or that you're street smart, and that you're this, and that's where the left fieldness kind of comes out, when you start doing things that are uncouth, and just, not being an upstanding citizen and being a good child, that the way you were raised. But those things build a character. So you learn, those things, the good and the bad, because we all know that, character is built in difficult times, not in good times. And it's the challenges that build a character to who you become. And I think just growing up in the township is a challenge itself. So I wouldn't have had it any other way, because then, that helped me, build, and speak to who I am. Growing up in Atteridgeville, and as well as Botshabelo and Bloemfontein, where my grandmother was, where it's my maternal home, helped me learn different, and those are two different environments. The Pretoria environment in Atteridgeville, we didn't have roads, or we had tarred roads, I think, even in the early 90s, but in Bloemfontein, on my grandmother's street, we only got a tarred road probably in the early 2000s, like 2002, right? So you have that dynamic for instance. If it's not maybe like the late 90s, like 99, 2000, 2002, was only when we got like a tarred road. There's still no tarred road. Like there's a tar road in my grandmother's house. The street next to it is no tar. But Atteridgeville, it's gravel. But Atteridgeville, you will not drive on a gravel road. So, it's those dynamics. But they teach you to become a South African, because we speak multiple languages with South Africa, and you can operate from all spheres. So I think that is what helped me build and become the man that I am today. Those two environments, understanding both, but also the resilience of growing up in the township and trying to find a way to not only fight the system, but also create a life for yourself outside of it.
I mean, you had a very big break at a very young age. You gave us, hit songs like Show Them, Khatlalenna. How was that? When was your first time where you thought, I'm big in the music industry?
I mean, possibly when Khatlalenna came out, because it had a great adoption. The youth culture around that time was heavily bubbling. Like the youth were getting and gaining their own voice. It's around 2007. That's where the rise of the influx of youth was happening. So right now, as we know, we've got more young people than we do older people, and that era started then. Where you're looking at kids who were born in, let's say, 2000, and who are now today like in their mid-20s, and those are the people who are moving the needle, fighting for employment, and today, right? At that time they were like 7, 8, and we know that when you hit the kids with the record, in music we always say if you hit the kids and you hit the senior citizens, you've basically hit everybody. So the record is bound to be a hit. So Khatlalenna at that point was resonating a lot with the young kids, like the 8-year-olds, and because they were singing it, the parents or the grandmothers were also singing it, or they knew it, and that's how you'd always quantify a hit. Even if you look in the Khatlalenna video, there's a scene there where I've got kids in the car, because that's how you quantify what a hit record is. Like when you're walking down the street and the kids are singing it, they're singing Pirimaru. Pirimaru didn't become a big record because of me and you. It became a big record because the kids were singing it in the streets. You saw videos of kids in the pool, splashing water, and what you build, those become like they lead what is to come. So that's when I knew that there was something there. But I mean, obviously, then Show Them, you then becomes a cheapest, like a juggernaut, right? It's like a monstrosity of a record. Then you start. It doesn't. That Show Them doesn't affirm that I'm big, but it just opens me up to a wider audience. Shows that I might have never played, local and international audiences, but I think to know that I'm big in the industry was Khatlalenna, definitely.
I mean, you've shared some good insights there to say, a hit is a hit when the kids are singing it, and the elderly citizens would also join in. I think that's very insightful. But when you were writing, and when you were getting involved, were you thinking of, I want to make a hit, or what was that moment that produced the hit?
You never go into writing a record saying, I want to write a hit. You only know if you've got something after you've written the record. I don't think there's anyone who goes in and says, like, I'm gonna write a hit record right now. You write something and then you wait for after. In my life, the best songs that I've made and that have been the biggest songs or whatever have all happened under like 30 minutes. It's never been 8 hours in studio or 2 days and we're working on this song. No, it's literally been like 30 minutes, because firstly, it's skill. You've dedicated the time to it, so time is there. Then it's the skills component, right? So once you've done things often enough, they kind of become second nature. So, and that's why even the best artists in the world today, they don't necessarily take long to make records. They take long selecting the right one. You know what I'm saying? So they'll make a lot of records because they've put in time and effort. It's like they say, you don't pay me for doing the job in 5 minutes. You pay me for the years, and experience. It took me 20 years to learn how to do this job in 5 minutes. That's what you pay me for, right? And the same goes with music. And I think any other craft or any other sector and industry that people are in, once you've done something and you've become so well versed at it, you no longer really spend a lot of time. And I had been making music and had been in music since probably 1998. So it wouldn't have taken me long to create a record. So Khatalina, like for instance, it was just 4 instruments. Like, it was the synth, it was the kick, it was the clap, and it was a voice that said hey, hey, which served as a percussion. And that was it. Right? And then it was my vocal and my raps and Toadie's raps. And that was it. Like just 4 instruments made in 30 minutes. So it's the people always determine what a hit is. You can only make the best music. Then you have to decide. I mean, before we got to Khatalena, I had made maybe, let's say 30, 40 other songs. With 37 MPH, I had probably made 4 or 5 other songs, but 40 or whatever before I even got into studio with him. And then when that one comes out, people will always think it's an overnight success, but they say it takes years to create an overnight success. So the people always deem the hit, not you as the creative or the writer.
I mean, you've had a lot of hits in your lifetime, and you also wrote AKA smash hit Congratulate. I think from that period, how did you sort of decide or navigate the music industry? Because you sort of moved from being involved to sort of now the background and the business side of it. Maybe take us through that journey to say, how did that transition happen and why did it happen?
So, the funny thing with AKA, so Congratulate was actually, so people like to say, well, I wrote this for AKA, I wrote that, or I wrote that. If you know AKA and you know how arrogant he was, he would never let anybody do anything for him. He wanted to do everything himself when it came to his music, right? He was very hands-on, but also he had a very objective perspective of who he was. So he knew his strong points. He musically, right? He was very objective. So with that record specifically, he actually went out and sourced KG from Morafe. I don't know if you remember Morafe with Kulichana and Toady Mac and Cageism. So he went and got KG from Morafe to come and co-write or write the chorus part of the record. Which would have been very strange, right? Like you go and get Morafe, KG from Morafe was predominantly known for Setswana. But what people didn't realize how great KG was melodically. And that's what Keenan wanted. He knew that melodically he might not be able to execute what KG had done. I mean, what KG could potentially do. But let me go get someone. And he went there. So for me, it wasn't just about that. So I wrote certain parts of the song, wrote it with him, whatever. But because we wanted to, again, 3, 4, 5 heads are better than one. We wanted to create something that had larger audience and mass appeal. And I'd already been producing the album. So I was producing levels anyway. So I was bound to be in studio. I was bound to write on this song or do backing vocals there or do, co-production there. So it was bound to happen. So because I was already producing the album, that's how, just to kind of like clear that, because a lot of people would say like, oh, no, but you wrote this. And I'm like, guys, it's not necessarily like that. Keenan was a great writer. He was sharp, great melodically, very, broad musical taste. But yeah, so going into once you go into that and you start making your stance you do one hit as a record producer, and then you say, oh, I could do it again, right? Then you try another one, or you write another record, and you write a melody, and then you're like, oh, I'm like, then that's where the bug starts biting, and it's all downhill from there because you don't even have to do anything anymore. Everything is on auto cruise. But then I think at that moment, because I had put out an album called Cool Forever, and at that moment, I remember I wasn't promoting it or anything like that. You know, I had put in a lot of money to do it, whatever. At that time, I was having an issue with my label, and I said, okay, fine, because you guys are responsible for the marketing, because they had taken up production cost, and I had taken up recording costs. So I said, okay, recording costs is fine, but because you guys want to take up production costs, and we're producing the album in Japan. Like the album was made in Japan because it was a die cut. It had holes and a die cut. You know, like when you're printing like a book like that gets a hole here. You know what I'm saying? So it had those holes, and it was cardboard and had a plastic inner layer where the CD went in. The whole thing was cardboard, and then it had embossed like gloss paper. So it was quite an expensive thing to produce. So I said to them, because if you want to produce it, like, and that's the design that I want, and you want to make it in China or in Japan or wherever, that's fine. But because you don't want to cover certain costs and we want to do that, I won't promote the album. So yeah, I'll lose because people might not hear the great music that I've made. But you know, if you wanna hit hard, hit the pocket, you know. And I said, but the biggest loser will be you, because then you'll struggle to recoup, and you'll struggle to get your investment out. And you know, it was just kind of like, you know, those kind of business tactics that you'd want to use. Not advising that it be used, you know. There's no CDs today anyway. So, and at that time, kind of it worked. So everybody felt the pinch, and myself as well. And then that's when Keenan was like, "Yo, I love that album so much. I just want the same album, but with an AKA name on it. You know, I want to make the same thing. I like the use of samples. I like the use of this, but with me on it, can you produce my album?" So once that bug bites, and you start writing one record, you write another, you produce this, you co-produce that, you know, it just becomes easy, you know, and then you never stop from there. And once you know you've got that, you seek other things beyond just producing or writing or being, you know, in behind the scenes.
I think you've really had diverse experience in music, and you understand the whole picture. Maybe let's get into the business of music. In South Africa, we've seen that music has evolved. There's been a lot of backlashes against record labels. There have been artists that have tried to go out and contracts, etc. Maybe let's start here. From your understanding of music, what are some of the fundamentals that an artist would have to understand, and how does this beast we know as the music industry work?
I love that you said the business of music and not the music business, you know, because those are two different things, I'd like to believe. So we'll talk about the fundamentals and what are the important things that you should know as an artist. But if we are addressing the music business, is show business, it's entertainment, it's where we are, it's the lights, the camera, you know, it's the music business. We're in the music business, you know, we're in the show business. But the business of music is another thing, and that's, you know, that's how you addressed it, and that's a correct addressing. The business of music, everything starts and ends with diligence, right? So attention to detail. And we like to think that talent, you know, and the music is the most important thing. But honestly, the most important thing is legal and contracting. And, you know, those things are super important. And it's not always where everybody gets it right. Right. So now we get into the fundamentals. Not every even record label or distribution company gets it right, right? There's been albums, massive albums that have been released by major record companies, or, you know, independent, or what they would call at that time major indies, which are like small companies but with a big enough footprint, like Gallo. It's not a major, you know, but it's a you know, indie major, you know, it's stuff like that, Electro Mode, indie major, you know, and a lot of deals sometimes would get done without a contract, you know. I remember my album, Khatalina, came out on the single Khatalina came off the album The Main Event, which was a master recording owned by 37 MPH, because he was the guy who signed me. But he signed me verbally, and we never had a contract, right? And the contract that he signed with the distributor at the time was written on a piece of paper. In the office. It was torn out of a journal and they wrote it on a piece of paper with Chris Galakis and myself and him, and he just wrote it. So it doesn't matter what the music sounds like. There needs to be something that governs how the music is disseminated or deployed into the market. And I think artists need to learn the most important thing in that is the legal part and controlling the narrative, right? Because a lot of times we like to think, oh, the music, yeah, but that was my recording. I mean, we've seen that. Oh, that's my recording. You know, I recorded in my producer studio. I recorded in whoever studio. I recorded in that studio. And then, you know, someone will say, no, but if you record here, we own the master recording and what, you know, and partially to some extent that is true, you know, not holistically, right? There's no black and white, you know. Yes, it's true. No, there's a huge gray area because there are certain things that go into it. Are you a work for hire, for instance, as a producer? So even if I'm in your studio, am I saying, please produce this for me, right? And then, you know, we will share this or whatever, right? Because even if it is your studio, you're still hired, you know, you're a work for hire. Unless you're saying, I'm your artist and we will work in your studio, by the virtue that I'm your artist means that automatically, if you're taking up the artist responsibility with the costing responsibility, you will then, by virtue of that, then be ownership of the master recording, whatever. But it's a big gray area. So I think artists need to learn that, the business of music, contracting. In America, there's two questions they ask you in the States when you go into a studio or whatever. First question is, who's your lawyer? Second one is, who's your sound engineer? Right? Not who's your manager or who's your agent. No. You know, the deals are negotiated by the lawyers, right? Not by the manager, because the deal is going to come in contract form. So the lawyers are number one, you know, in the States. Then second will come the labels, and then, well, the artist manager, and then, you know, all of that stuff, whatever. But the legal is what starts at first. And I also had to learn some of those things the hard way. Because I didn't always know what I knew, right? I knew that I wanted to publish my own music. And then at a later stage in 2009, I knew I wanted to release my own records. But, you know, some school fees I had to pay the hard way. But I think there's more fundamentals. But I think the most critical one is let everything start and end with legal. I think that will save you a lot of headaches. You know, like, I don't want to say brands, but, you know, National Mobile used to have the tagline, you know, saving you time, saving you money, putting you first, you know, all those three things. That's what will happen with the right structures in place, the right representation in place to negotiate the right deal for you, you know, to make sure that you're getting the best points, to make sure that if you're on a license and the master period lapses, that your masters revert at a certain time. So all of those things. And it might be 10 years from now where your masters revert. It might be 15, whatever it might be. It feels like it's a long time from now, but really time flies, you know. And when that part hits and some people have passed away and, you know, somebody's moved to the States and you can't get a hold of whoever, the only thing that's going to govern what the output of that matter is going to be that document that you signed 15 years ago. You know, so I would say every artist needs to just start there with the fundamentals, then we'll get everywhere else.
Looking at that, I mean, you've sort of seen different, I don't know whether I should call them eras, come about in music. The Amapiano, now we've got Mpho coming up. But the fundamental question that a lot of Americans, and I think even Davido has asked us in the US, is to say, where did Amapiano come from? And everybody tries to sort of understand what originates a sound. And we've never really heard the right answer, because people would then say, you know what, it came from. But and from your understanding of having seen the different generations in music, where does this begin? How do we wake up one morning and Amapiano is now big? What's the beginning point?
Innovation. That's the beginning point. When someone wants to continuously push themselves and try something new, that's the starting point. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit as creatives. because we don't see ourselves as an important part of this, let's say, financial ecosystem, right? Or the business ecosystem. We don't see that. We think the finance guys, the lawyers, the what other industry is there where is so highly regarded, the
Health,
doctors,
yeah.
and we think those guys are the end all be all, and they are number one at the front of the queue when it gets to the banks, and when it gets to the funding and the finance, all of that stuff. And we don't see ourselves as founders and creators, right? We're the number one creators. We're the number one startup guys. We're the number one founders. The same mentality that would apply to a tech startup, to a founder of a tech startup, is the same that we do every day. We start something every day from nothing. You take a record that doesn't exist, a sound that doesn't exist, and you found something, and you start something, and you create it, and it gets adoption, it gets market penetration. Before you know it, it's got 1 billion people listening to it. I mean, you've got a tech background. Like, if you built a product with 1 billion, like 1 billion people adoption, I mean, we wouldn't even be sitting here right now. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't even have time for us. You wouldn't even have a cell phone or something. You'd be like, skiing in Saint Moritz or something. Like it's that is. I think that is what we don't give ourselves credit for, is that we look at that sector or other sectors as more important. When someone, if a doctor if a doctor is a founder of a clinic that now specializes in heart disease, we look at that with the lens, or society looks at that with the lens of a more professional lens, and wow, we commend this guy, and he's such a big achievement. But this artist, every day he starts something. Every day he writes a song, that 1 billion people are going to listen to. He writes a song that will connect, West Africa to South Africa to the Americas to, Asia's. Every day he's a starter, and he's a founder. And that's how you find, them do AKTRPs, who look for new sounds and come across a lock drum and want to use it, and therefore that becomes, the sound of the day, because he was starting something, right? And he doesn't have the viewed novelty of an accountant or a tech founder, but today his sound that he founded, that he saw, now resonates globally. And I think that's what pushes us to see something different each and every, let's say, once in a while we see like an Amapiano or a Lukombo or a sound that gets global adoption, is because we wake up one day, we want to push ourselves and we want to innovate. That's how you do it. That's how you change, the landscape. You don't do it by, but again, look, it's risky, right? Because unfamiliar territory, no one likes unfamiliarity, So if you do something like, I can tell you now, people try and create different sounds every day. Producers, composers try and make different sounds every day, and none of them get it right, And the same applies to startups or spaza shops or whatever startup that you might be in. Every day people start companies, and the stats say that 90% of, or 90 something percent of those companies will fail in the first 5 years, etc. And that's the truth. So every day people try something. One time it hits with them do AKTRP, finding a lock drum sound that now resonates with people and hits the rest of the world. And I don't think it's important where it comes from, right? I don't think it's important to know him up, because that's where there's a joy in the mystery. And I think as people, we've passed the information age with the access to Google and all of that stuff, where there was an influx of information, and goodbye to the encyclopedias and whatever, and hello to Google. We've passed the information age. I think right now we're in the creator age, right? So there's a lot of people who want to create their own things. What they called it in the beginning, they called it the fourth industrial revolution, and but it's the creator age, right? If you're narrowing it down, people want to create their own cups, their own microphones, their own podcasts. They don't want to rely on a certain streamer or whatever to then buy their product or beg them for a show. They create their own thing. So, people create right now. And you'll see the timelines get shorter and shorter. So for the people for Mdueke TRP or whoever who was the founder and a creator of the log drum, or someone who found the log drum sound, in a couple of years there'll be someone who finds something else, and the timelines get shorter and shorter because it's just the nature of the world. We're in a creator space, but the only way you get there is through innovation and from hitting the same point continuously over time. I don't think if you can't hit here today and then go there tomorrow, you're not going to make an impact. You need to, continuously hit that mark. And then one day you'll create a dent, and that's where we'll see the boom. But I think everything comes from innovation. It comes from the seeking of new, wanting to find something different, wanting to try. And who knows, we see it happen once, but we don't know if that guy had 1 billion tries before to create a new sound. But that's what it comes from. It comes from innovation and the desperation of seeking something new.
I mean, if I had to characterize your life, I'd say it's filled with a lot of innovation, because you've literally gone into industries, shifted and moved to the next one. Your hat as an entrepreneur, as a businessman. Let's delve into that. Where did that bug hit in? Because I know there's a bit of tech, there's some feel-good music, there's some productions there as well. But when did you sort of realize that, you know what, I'm good at this thing and this is the first business I'm doing?
A long time ago. My first business was registered at CIPC in 2002. When did you register your first business?
I don't even know, 2016, 17, 15.
Yeah. My business was registered in 2002. I remember, and it was a closed corporation. It was called DLX Deluxe Clothing. And I started it with another guy at the time. And I remember we made 3 T-shirts. And they had blue sleeves. They were, those sleeves that go this way, not like this, but the sleeve that goes to the neck. It had a blue sleeve, short sleeve, and white front. And we made 2. We made a blue and a red one, and 2 blue and 1 red one. I remember, something like that. And we printed DLX Deluxe on one because we couldn't afford the printing for the rest of them, so we printed on one. And there was no social media at that time where we could promote there, and there was sales points and whatever. So everything was like trying to sell it like that. And I think we sold those T-shirts. We sold 1 or 2, and then we wore the others. And then from that money, we bought whatever, drinks or whatever the situation was, whatever. But we charged the money, right, which was maybe $50 or whatever that was made from that T-shirt. But that was when I think I knew I wanted to go into business. I knew that my regardless which industry I was going to end up in, I was going to make a business of that industry. And I was going to try and make it as successful as possible. So that's when it bites. And then I then go in and I was still in high school at the time. And then finish high school and then go into looking at music publishing. And I remember saying I think as much as there's the business of the sound recording, which is the music itself, there's also the business of the publishing, which is, I always compare it to like a BMW or a car. And I said, if you look at a car outside, it's a BMW or a Volkswagen or a Toyota, whatever it is. But the brakes are made by Ferodo, the lights are made by Bosch, the different components in the car are manufactured by different companies, but the car itself is this, and that's what publishing is, And I looked at it and I was like, I really want to get into that space because at that time we had a lot of like Master P and the Cash Money guys or whatever who were owning a lot of the stuff down in the US, but they were dealing like with bigger states, right? But the idea of it was to own a portion of your music, even if it's a portion of it and not 100% of it. And the most important portion that matters, because the most important portion is your authorship, your compositionship, your writing, your arranging. That's the most important part, because without those components, the song doesn't exist. So then I registered my publishing company before I even did my record company. My publishing company, I think, was a 2006 registration. before I even did my record company. But it was in that period of between DLX Deluxe Clothing in 2002 to my publishing company in 2006 where I knew business is going to be what I do. It's going to be where I am. And when I got into music, before I even signed to the label, I already knew that whatever it is that I'm going to do, my publishing is going to be owned by me. It's going to be administrated by somebody, 1000%, because I can't collect from all over the world. I don't know if my song plays in China, how am I going to collect there? But I'm going to sign with a global publisher who will do an administrative deal. But I will own my publishing. And at that time, it looks like something small, but even today, if I wanna, when I wanna move my catalog from my current administrator to another administrator, I've got leverage. I can say, look, to move this thing is gonna cost R1. If you want me to move it, it's gonna cost you R1. The guy says, I'll pay you R1. The other guy says, no, don't move it, we'll pay you R3. It's now you've got leverage, and you don't see it. How far back is it? 30 years or whatever? Or how far back is it? Not 30, 20 years, maybe 20 years?
2002.
Yeah.
We're getting old.
Yeah. So you don't see it at that time, right?
Yeah.
You don't see that as value. And that's the difference between having foresight and instant gratification. It's like, life is long but short. And as much as we want things when we want them because of the kind of world that we live in, you also want to enjoy the process of getting them. You want to enjoy. That's what the stories are. The stories are not in the money that you're making or whatever. The stories are in the journey took you to do that. When you're sitting around a fire and you're telling someone a story, you don't want to say, then I got R1 billion from my mother and I started this company. There's no fun in that, right?
Yeah.
You wanna tell a story of, I started out like this and it was hard to get there. And, I finally did this. And it's a more interesting story that people want to see. The same with films. People want to see films with stories. And I find that to be what my journey is about, and how me getting into business is something that, started as early as that. But the story of it is a long one, that maybe we can get into detail on, on a part 2 of when you invite me, or part 3 or part 5. But yeah, that's when the bug really bit.
I mean, publishing, as somebody who's written a book, I'm thinking you're printing the book, you're taking it to Exclusive Books, they put it on their store, Exclusive Books sells the book, they take the money for 3 months, keep it in whatever their trust account, they make interest on it. They give it back to the publishers. The publisher keeps it for another maybe month, makes interest on it. Yeah. And then 6 months down the line, you as the person who wrote the book get the money. So there's Exclusive Books, which sells the book directly to customers. There's the publisher who basically is doing a digital publishing. There's the printer, and then there's you. Take me through the music version. What is that chain in music? And if you could, let's base it on 100,000. Could say $100,000. Who gets how much out of that chain?
You see, I love it when people talk dollar talk. Dollar talk makes me happy. I think because not because of the money, but because it gives a global sense, and it shows that whoever I'm talking to is quite global. So I like talking to people and talking dollars. It's so music publishing is, like I said, all the components that go into making a sound recording. So if you play guitar, and I make the drum and play the keys and do that, and you play the guitar and someone else sings, or writes the lyrics, those people there are entitled to their share of publishing, right? So they will then get a split according to how much they've contributed on the song. If the song generates a revenue of $100,000, so mind you, you could still write the record and not perform it, right? So back in the day, the performers of the song were not necessarily the writers of the song. There were songwriters, like US wise, you'd have songwriters who would only gain revenue through publishing, and then you would have performers or singers who would gain revenue from the sales and that part of the sound recording, right? So the publishers would then represent the writers and the beat makers or the composers, the red-headed stepchildren, the people who are never seen, because they're working in the back. So if there's $100,000 that comes through, that $100,000, depending how you look at it. So if we're looking at a music industry perspective, the $100,000 needs to be split 50-50. So it's $50,000 on the publishing, $50,000 on the sound recording.
Okay.
Right.
Maybe take me through, when you say sound recording, are you talking about the studio?
The song.
The song.
Yeah. Remember the publishing, like I say, it's like the car, right? It's like the BMW. Different components in the BMW are made by different companies. Ferrodo makes the brake pads because BMW doesn't make brake pads.
But who gets that other 50% for the song?
So I'm going to get to that, right? So that car, when you take it apart, you get all of these different components. Those components are the publishing components when you take the song apart.
So the 50% goes to the bass guitar.
The 50% is then split amongst the bass guitarist, which is you, the keyboardist and drummer, which is me, and then the writer, which is person X.
Does that include the singer?
No.
So that includes the people that made the sound we're hearing, not vocalized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. The performer is someone else. That's the person who sings the song. That person will then get performer royalty and artist royalty because they would be the artist, the consumer-facing artist.
Where does that sit in the 50-50?
So that will sit in the other $50,000.
In the music one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So the $50,000 for publishing then gets split up amongst these guys. The other $50,000 then gets split up with the record label that takes that because they would own the sound recording.
I have a question. What if I told the bass guitarist to say, I need it to be dum dum dum? Does the publishing still go to him because he played what I told him?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So that's where also there's a lot of stuff that goes into that becomes quite a contentious perspective because just because you play it doesn't make you entitled to the publishing if you're playing what I told you.
I see.
You understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying I wanted to go da 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 da. You need to play that. I just cannot play it. Right? You are work for hire. If I could play it, I would do it.
Yeah.
But I'll give you 10,000 Rand to please play da 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 da. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you play something that as a bassist you feel would go perfectly in there, but it's not something that I said I want in, you then become a co-composer.
I see.
So we're all composers in the room.
The 50%.
Yeah. But if I say, do this and you do that, it does not make you a composer. You're just playing what I told you to play. But if I say, find something or you decide to do something on your own, then it's your IP. It's your melody line that you played. It's you thought of that. You are then entitled to be a co-composer and get a share.
I'm now seeing where the lawyers are very important.
You understand what I'm saying? And then on the other $50,000, the label will then say, okay, we have $50,000. That's the revenue generated from the song. The artist is on a 20% royalty deal. So they will then be entitled to 20% of the $50,000. Then the 80% of the $50,000 then is taken by the record company. Unless the artist is also the record company, which we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing a lot of independents today. If you're an independent, then you reap the rewards of the entire 50%. The entire $50,000.
And the other 50,000, if I'm an independent artist, and maybe let's use a practical example. We've often heard that, Taylor Swift bought back her masters and Beyonce bought back their masters. So if I then own the record label, I get the 50%. The publishing, can I also get that if my deal was play dum dum dum?
Yeah, if you contributed as a composer, if you are like I'm a performer, and I'm also a composer or an author. That's who I am. So SJR. So I will perform the music, which means as an artist, I will get a portion of the $50,000 from my record label. But I'm also an author and a composer. So I will also get 20% or 30% or whatever I've negotiated on the publishing side. So I'll get 30% from here and I will get 100% because I am an artist and label owner. So I will get 100% of 50%. So I will then own 80% of publishing and sound recording and master recording. I will own 80% of 100%.
Where does the 20% go to?
It goes to everybody else who I worked with per se.
Okay.
You
Does
understand
it
what I'm saying?
have to go to the other people that
Yeah,
you
it has to.
So let's go now to the
Because that's
situation.
how you practice. That's fair practice, right?
Now in South Africa, we had a scandal where a lot of Amapiano artists were coming out and saying, I did this song with, Maporisa or whoever, and I only got this much. And that question really boggled people to say, but how does this work? And we also saw Jerusalema, a huge song that blew up. And, one of the vocalists said, I only got this much. And people sort of got confused to say, what is going on? Is it that people are being robbed of that percentage that they're supposed to get? Is it the contract? What's happening?
What are the terms?
So the terms dictate, not the fact that you were there in the recording.
No, let's talk the terms, right? So if you sit with the pilot in the cockpit, does that mean you flew the plane? So what are the terms? See, I don't want to say, whoever is bad, whoever robbed this person, or this label, is doing this, or this person. What are the terms of engagement? And then how do we go into this? And that's why when we spoke about fundamentals, I then said the legal, I had to find out the long way that the legal is the most important, right? So don't put money into Gucci or don't put money into whatever, brands. Let's put the money into lawyers, right? And they're the only people that make the money at the end of the day anyway. So what are the terms? So I find it, so I don't want to chime in on those cases because they needed to have been terms. And I've seen a lot of people who are very quick to speak on it, to say, okay, yeah, but this is how it works. So if Sbanbani did not pay Sbanbani, then Sbanbani would owe this person X amount. But remember, the interest rate that you get at the bank is not the same that I get at the bank. Everything is relative. It's all different. The percentage that I could get as an artist signed to the same label as you are is not the same that you would get. So just because, so what are we saying? So because you are on a 30% or 50-50 JV does not mean I'm on a 50-50 JV. I could be on a 13% royalty. And, when you're driving around in a Lamborghini and I'm still catching taxis, then I but my labels robbed me because then I'm comparing myself. We can't do that. Every scenario is different. So I think then what would have to happen is that we'd have to, look at the terms of engagement. In most cases, there is no contract, right? Because we're in studio, we're having fun. We're not in there for business. We're making beats. We're smoking humbly or drinking whatever, it's fun times. Then there is no contract. Then the music goes out, it gets released, and then the song, then someone says, oh, but I'm on the song, or I said this line, or I said that.
And by then it's too late.
By then it's too late because then you're in a back and forth. It's better to just get this stuff out of the way before we even go into studio. And that's where, we need to start creating these best practices within the music industry.
It's fundamental.
And start taking control and setting a good playing field for this for where we are, because this music economy in South Africa is a real thing. Organizations with chairmen and chairwomen and chairpeople and chairpersons and CEOs and whatever, and I have to always pause myself because I can be a little bit of a swearer, and I'm trying to keep it clean. But these people are not dog poo. These are real people. Like, they're big deals. They're executives coming out of different companies, Standard Bank or whatever, and coming to become CEOs of CMOs and collection societies. These are real people. We have a real formalized music economy in South Africa, a serious formalized music economy. That's why the major labels are here. Your Warners, your Sonys, your Universals are in the country, because it's a controlled economy. It's an investable economy, and you can predict and you can see the trends, and you can put your money here and you can reap the rewards. And because of things like that, we need to be able to do the same within different sectors of this music ecosystem, right? We need to be able to say, these are the practices for being in studio. When we're in studio and we're about to engage, if your artist and my artist are going into studio, and we know, your artist needs to be able to tell you, hey, I'm going into studio with JR's artist. We hop on a phone call together and say, look, boys are going into studio together. We know they're creative. We know they're good. Let's get to an agreement, right? It doesn't matter what the outcome is. The share split on publishing will be 50-50. Those are the managers having the conversation, right? Okay, is he going to be okay with it? I think he should be okay. In principle, can we agree to that? Then we will go back and liaise with the artists and say, look, I had a deal with Mpho yesterday when we had a conversation over the phone with you guys in the studio, that because you guys are both contributing, one is going to get on the keys, the other one's going to make the drums, one is going to do, it would be unfair to say, 37.1%, like 0.2%, like all of those things are going to be irrelevant, right? So we decided, how does a 50-50 split for the composition work that you guys did for? Therefore, you don't put the artist in an awkward position of, before we work, let's negotiate the splits. Or after we're done, you have to bring out a split sheet, put it on the table, and people have to fill in percentages. It gets very awkward, right? But how do we need to create normal practices around that. And how do we do that? We need to, managers are a big component in that, and we need to create more managers, not agents or like younger brothers who want to party with me, and therefore when we get to whoever, he's my road manager or whatever. We need to create serious, managers. Coming up, I had two managers. I had a personal manager and a business manager. The personal manager was the person I was living my day-to-day life with, right? That's the person who knows how to have a fun time. We're doing things together. We're on the road together. If I've got an idea, he's the person I bounce it off of. And then his uncle was my business manager, who at the time, 2008, was working at JP Morgan. He was my business manager. So all the business stuff that was coming in, he was taking control of. Let's look at the money. Let's look at this. Let's look at the contract. No, this contract's not right. We're going to go into this. We're doing a deal with Renault. He's the business guy, right? And we don't have that today. Your one manager is doing everything. Yeah. So if you want it to work, you need to create best practices for the ecosystem. Because if you don't have those, everything falls apart. And unfortunately, it's, one of my mentors, the late Chris Galakis, always used to say, it's always fun and games until there's money on the table. When we're in studio, no one cares. It's nice. We're drinking. We're having fun. Until that song becomes a hit record and there's money in the bank, then you'll see how people change.
I mean, I once read an article, and it said that Taylor Swift bought her masters for her first album for $300 million from the company that owned it, or from Scott. And in my mind, I thought, first album, $300 million, the amount seemed very big, right? And now timesing it in rands, we're talking billions, right? Maybe take me through that. When she's buying back her masters for $300 million, what does that mean, and how does she make a return on investment on that? Because the owner of the masters must have been earning an income on those masters. Because, I mean, if they're priced at $300 million, it must have revenue coming in every month. And now that she's buying them back, she must also now be able to use them to make the money back. What does that mean, owning the masters?
I wanna say this right. So the Taylor Swift situation, I remember she wanted to buy back her masters, but I think they were too expensive. I think they were too overpriced. So what she then did was she went back and re-recorded her entire catalog, the first, I think, 4 albums that she had with Scooter Braun. Was it Scooter Braun? No. It's Big Machine, the record label. So she re-recorded the entire catalog she had with Big Machine. Now, that sounds a bit unethical, right? Because as a CEO of Big Machine, you've spent, $30 million over X amount of years making sure this artist is a success. You spent $5 million per album. You've invested in tours, all of these things. So just looking at like just the music investment on the music alone, not the brand, not the touring, not just the music alone, you probably spent $30 million investing in this talent. And you invest to be able to make money back. And that's why when you see something, you invest in it for either venture or private equity, whichever way you invest in that, because you invest in it because you want your investment to give you a certain return over a certain period. And that's what music is, right? You invest in the talent, and hopefully it gives you the returns that you need, and it's the way it is.
So that investment doesn't mean owning the masters.
So that investment means you own the masters.
So
right?
Everything that this artist does in studio, I own.
You own. Right, because and that's what people now have found to be a difficult pill to swallow.
And from the 50-50 owning the masters, you get the 50 for the music, or you get the 50 for the music and the publishing.
So it depends
on the deal, on the lawyer,
on the terms.
Okay,
you see what I'm saying? You can get under specific, like different deals, like 360s, for instance, which 360 means you're getting from the master recording, the publishing, the merchandising, the touring, you're getting a portion of everything, right? That's a new deal structure as of the last, let's say, 10 years that was created to be able, when streams started coming in and sales started going down, companies in the US formed the 360 deal because album sales alone were not enough, to warrant and sustain the investment or give the investor the right amount of return. So then they created a 360 deal to make sure that the investment amount is recouped and profits are seen from different spaces. So if you're doing not just the sound recording or the master, so you can see profits as well from touring, merchandising, and publishing. So that deal came into play as a 360. But to chat on the Taylor Swift matter, to go back to that, is once you re-record, like Taylor Swift went and did a re-recording, and everybody thought it was unethical. But the fact of it is that like what she is now recording is seen as a new sound recording.
Because everything is now new.
Is new.
Yeah.
So whatever was that song does no longer apply, right? So, and again, what do I have as an artist that the label doesn't have? I've got an audience. So when I put this new project out, which is an old project, and I'm saying JR remastered and brings back the classics, and I bring back the Main Event, the album, re-recorded in 2025, but, with the same music, same beats from 2007, 2008, that is now a new sound recording. That now belongs to me and now cuts out the old label. Their music can still be up. But the fact is, where am I directing the audience? Right? And artists have an authentic connection, not a paid connection that labels have. Artists have a direct connection, especially now with Instagram and all these social media platforms. With TikTok and all of that, we have a direct engagement platform with our audience. So if I say to my audience, guys, if you love me and you've been rocking with me, this label's trying to do X, Y, and Z to me, and I don't want that anymore, and please stream my music from here, forget those guys, they're bad guys. Everybody's going to go where the artist directs them to. And that's what Taylor did in that deal, right? She re-recorded her music and therefore devalued, the past assets. So it doesn't mean they're not valued at all. They just don't have as much value as before she did the sound recording, the re-recordings, and redirected the audiences. So we need to always take a look at the value of music. Now, if let's say we're looking at the Taylor Swift scenario as her having paid the $300 million or $500 million, are we saying that sound recording or the master or the music, are we saying it appreciates in value? It's an appreciating asset. Now, we need to ask ourselves that. Are we seeing this music as an appreciating asset? As an artist, obviously, I'm going to say, yes, my music is gold. It appreciates every year. My music, is going to be greater than great in the next coming years. But if you look at the trend data of streaming, streams become lower and lower year on year.
Unless you're Mariah Carey.
When also for Mariah, it's during a small period, right? Just Christmas. So at that point, you have a peak, and then you back to a plateau or even like a decline. And then you will have another peak, then you'll have another valley. So are we saying that my music will continue to grow every year, and I'm therefore going to put an assumption of a 35% year-on-year growth for the next 100 years? I don't know. I don't think so. When I'm looking at the trend, the data, and the trends are declining year on year, what makes you say that what you paid $30 million for 10 years ago for a recording, or $3 million for, is now today worth $300 million, when trends show that sales are declining year on year? That's why artists are going on more tours.
But if I may ask there, how many, or what's the period that record labels are able to make back their investment usually before they sort of deem these not as valuable?
Again, it depends on the deal term. So it depends on if, if we're acquiring an artist, or let me not say acquiring an artist, if we're investing in an artist as a record label, the vesting period is dependent on when the artist becomes popular or picks up, or when the public, sees this hit or whatever, right? So I could invest in this artist for the next 10 years and not see a single cent, right? I could invest in this artist for a year and start seeing returns. So it's how long is a piece of string, right? Then becomes the question. So I don't think the question is, what is a suitable return period. I think that would be up to the label's appetite. How much of an appetite do you have for how long you then stay in the game is entirely up to you. Some labels have a 5-year appetite with the same artist. Some labels have a 12-month appetite. Just depends how long you're willing to develop, run the race, and if you see great value in this talent. If you might not see great value in the talent, then you put a shorter time. I'm going to give this artist a 12-month incubator, and if in 12 months we don't have a hit, then I'll drop the artist and let them go. Some artists, you see great value for them in the future and say, look, the world might be a little slow to the party, but I'll keep investing in this artist because they've got a great voice, or they've got, a unique talent. And I believe that in the next 2 to 3 years, the world will see this and will have great penetration. And then you find that in 3 years' time, you really do see, significant, change in this artist trends and the data. And there's great opportunity to penetrate the market intensely, and then maybe you can intensify a little bit on marketing, whatever, to make sure that you really get to where you want to hit. Then you get great return. So it's just up to the label's appetite, for the period, or for the artist, in terms of how long they stay in there.
Indulge me here. Looking at the media industry, of which I understand better than the music industry. You release a video, you put it on YouTube, and every time somebody watches the video and clicks the ad, you get money, right? If they subscribe to YouTube and they pay membership, you get money, right? Masters, music. How does that work in terms of that framework? Is it that every radio station would pay the same as a TV show? Who decides who should pay how much for my music and how they are able to use it?
Right. Great question. Right? So who decides how much is paid, per play? Which is something that, still kind of confuses me till today. And why the number, right? What warrants that number to be it? Community radio stations pay differently to regional radio stations that pay differently to national radio stations.
Because on YouTube, it's based on the views, right?
It's based on the views.
And the clicks, yeah.
But on Spotify, it's also based on the region.
Region and the... Okay.
So what an artist in the US might gain or earn $1,000 per 100,000 streams, in South Africa, you will earn 100 Rand per 100,000 streams.
So it's
or
a
in
bit
Africa.
like the YouTube model.
That's what I'm saying. Digitally, it's not always like that black and white. There are gray areas where different territories pay differently. And that's why you start seeing some companies don't have an appetite for regions like South Africa or certain portions, because yes, Africa in its number base is massive, right? But if we look at where music is being consumed, you could count those countries on one hand. Right. And we're not saying consumed like just listening to it, we're being needle moving consumption.
Yeah.
Revenue generating consumption.
Yeah.
South Africa, Botswana, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, maybe let's say Cote d'Ivoire, the Francophone regions, Cote d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, but all of those, again, you're gonna maybe count 10 countries that really move the needle, and therefore you find that then companies set up offices in 2 countries only. So you'll have a South African office to service Southern Africa.
Before we get there, because I'm failing to understand the onboarding process. So somebody's created a YouTube video. They go onto YouTube, they upload it, and YouTube then pays them per view, right? Somebody's created music. Where do they onboard it to, and how does that payment work? So maybe let's start with a gateway in.
Okay, so let's go gateway. Let's track back just one question more, because that's going to segue us into the gateway and how we upload and how the ingestion then happens. So the different territories will pay differently according to, I don't know what the metric is. And again, I don't know who sets the terms of how much. Is it the CMOs? Is it, maybe ICASA? Is it who sets the terms of what the radio is gonna, pay for whatever stream, right? Or whatever play. Again, even when it comes to music channels, right? There's the companies will have blanket licenses with collection societies and will pay. So media companies will have blanket licenses with collection societies, and they will pay a blanket fee.
Oh, I didn't know that, because that makes it different from the YouTube model.
You see what I'm saying? So a company X, which is a media broadcaster or whatever, will pay Samro a blanket license annually, right? To say, we're going to pay you 100 million rand.
And there's a SAMRO in every country.
In every country, right? Or SAMRO really represents Southern Africa, but then there are CMOs and collection societies like all over the world. So company X will pay this collection society a blanket license, and they will need to distribute that blanket license for the plays.
Based on what?
Based on what? For the plays that happen on channel music, if it happens on channel music and you get played 4 times on channel music, that payment will go towards that.
Is this payment for video and audio, or just it's a bundle payment?
No, but that is for the video, right? Okay. And audio. Like for the video. The audio part obviously will then be for radio and whatever. So, sometimes it builds up like that. So that's what I'm saying. The models are different, right? There's no consistency in the approach to practice, because one part is paying a blanket license. The other part is saying they will count it as it goes.
And they're counting
at a certain rate, at 256 cents or whatever per play on radio, or whatever it is now, right? So per play, 2 rand 50 or whatever per play, we will count it as it goes. So if you get played 1 million times, it'll be 2 rand 50 times 1 million. Versus this side, they're just saying blanket, but you as this collection society will need to disseminate that, according to how many plays have happened, based on the plays and all of that stuff. So, it's I don't know who decides that, and maybe I need to find out and do a little bit of research. But to segue now into your question, the ingestion process is you will go through a distribution company, right?
Is this a publishing company or a distribution?
No, music distribution. So
okay.
the song itself, you will put it into a music distribution business.
What is a music distribution? Is it like a YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of like a YouTube.
Do I go to Spotify or do I go to one?
You don't go to them directly.
Okay.
Yeah,
So one, and then they sort
they
of
don't want to deal
distribute.
with you. You know?
Okay.
You must remember there's when I launched, 5, the tech startup, the DIY tech startup in 2000 what, 22, something like 2022. There were 65,000 songs ingested a day globally
Into one platform or many different distribution platforms?
into Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, into listening or streaming platforms, right? There was 65,000 songs that artists released a day. Now, those 65,000 songs are coming through different distributors. So the distributor is essentially like an aggregator.
How much do they get?
It depends on the kind of
The
aggregator.
contract.
No, it depends on the kind of aggregator it is.
Oh.
So some of them will say pay a once-off fee and then we take nothing. Similarly to Five, which, at the time was our founding statement and our practice was that we take nothing from the artists. The artists would then take 100% of the royalty, but they would pay 50 Rand for the service because you have to have a service fee, So you would have a service fee and then you would have the monies, the distribution would go into your wallet or whatever wallet you're using, and then you would withdraw it into your bank account. So, but the ingestion process, you have to go through an aggregator. So the aggregator is where you ingest the music, you put your artwork, you write your details, your art, your metadata, which, everything, you write all of that. You ingest that into the platform. The platform then distributes that to Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, all of these streamers. It distributes that because the most important thing is that these guys manage the reliability of the data.
Makes sense.
Right? Because when you are just ingesting directly to Apple Music, they've got their own things. Your music needs to sound a certain way, certain hertz and certain quality. And if it does not meet those standards, they will not accept the ingestion. Right? So now imagine at 2002, there were 65,000 people. I'm pretty sure it's about 200 something thousand songs that get ingested a day.
And where you ingest it, wherever they distribute, the money goes to the
distributor, and then the distributor then gives it to the consumer.
And based on, does my song get more on Spotify or Apple Music? Who determines if somebody listens on Spotify and it's 2 Rand, and on how does that metric work?
Yeah. So again, who knows? Spotify is not the best pay.
Okay.
They actually possibly pay the least. Apple Music, I know, pays better than Spotify, but Tidal pays better than all of them, for instance,
Okay.
Which does not really have the numbers that Apple Music or Spotify have. But different streamers pay at different amounts per stream. So who's to say who pays what, right?
I think I'm reminded of a situation where a gospel artist in Nigeria, Sinach, has a record song, Waymaker. And people that produced the song, obviously being Christians that sang with her, are now coming out to say, oh, we want to sue because we didn't get part of the publishing stuff. But now my question is, where's the majority of the money today? Is it still, if an artist is starting up, what's the funnel for them to make majority of the money? Is it still the audio? Let's go back to 100,000. If they release a hit song, maybe let's take Jerusalema as an example by Master KG that made about 4 million Rand, according to statistics, right? That 4 million Rand or the 100,000 US dollars, where does it come from today? Is it coming from YouTube music? Is it coming from YouTube video? Is it coming from the TV stations? Where, in your understanding, does it sort of aggregate from?
I'd say it's a mix. It's not, and even if it's coming from one platform, it will not be like a large discrepancy between platforms. It won't be like YouTube music is at 70% and then the next guy is coming in at 30% or 20% and then 10. No, it will be quite close. You'll find that different, YouTube music maybe is responsible for, or YouTube maybe is responsible for 36% or 31% or 28%, then Apple Music is responsible for another 23%. Because again, in South Africa, we've got more Android phones, in hands than we do Apple phones. So by virtue of that, you have more Spotify users than you have Apple Music users. So definitely Apple Music then will not come in with the most, number of, like, they won't be the largest or the biggest contributor to that 4 million, right? Or to that $100,000 revenue. But then again, then in the Android part or whatever, then you've got maybe like other devices that are out of Apple. Then you've got Huawei. Then you've got Huawei Music, and then you've got, which will also be a contributor. So like I say, it's based on the device or based on the devices within that market. So it's because these things, a lot of them are, well, Apple is device determined. Huawei is device determined. But I don't think anything else is. I think for Samsung, you could use, anything. I think Apple Music now is a downloadable app as well. Spotify, so you can use anything. But I think people then want to go to the music with the platform then with the best algorithm. So platforms then start focusing on how do we serve this music, and that's where you see innovation coming in with Spotify, then doing a DJ. What's the DJ mix on Spotify? There's a DJ whoever on Spotify that serves you according to your algorithm, what you're listening to, or even they have a better algorithm than Apple Music does, or whoever will say we've got a better. So it's no one. It's a mix, right? It's like saying, from a marketing perspective, which platform gives us the biggest reach? It's a mix of platforms, because although we can deduce it down to, let's say, social media gives us let's say better reach or whatever.
They pay social media?
But out of home gives us bigger impact. So then you start to think, which one is better? Do we want larger impact, or do we want more reach that might not necessarily, convert or whatever? So it's a mixture. I found that it's a mixture of, and not just reliant on one. But does social media pay? I think, yeah, they do, definitely.
They've started to pay.
No, they do. They do pay. When you use a song as this thing, a sound on
TikTok and whatever.
Yeah, but I know, for instance, TikTok is not paying creators in South Africa, but music usage, you do pay.
Black Coffee, who's done quite well in the music industry, he then invested, or he bought shares in Gallo.
Yeah.
And obviously, the numbers are not really there in public, but people say maybe 75 million rand, and he bought a stake. When you buy or when you own a record label, and we're evaluating the record label, do record labels make financial sense? And what I mean by that is looking at the fact that you're getting all this music rights, and I guess it's not that much because everybody's just paying what they're supposed to pay, right? What then becomes the fundamentals of that? How do we quantify the value of a record label? Is it quantified on, I've got this many artists and I'm receiving this much cash flow every month? Or can it be quantified on, I've actually got a bundle of masters, and sometimes they make, what is that process to quantify that?
I think in this instance where Black Coffee, through his company Flight Mode, did the acquisition on Gallo. Gallo is known as historically a record company with a large catalog. So they represent a large number of catalog music, right? Dating, I think, all the way back to the 1960s, something like it. They've got a huge catalog. So their value lies in the catalog. And that's why Gallo is also a company of Arena Holdings, right? Which also, is a publication company, a media company, very well versed in publication. They've got large archives, for instance. So that business speaks to that, because it's a business based off of like huge catalog and historic and archives. So they are a business about that. So different strokes, because one business might value its catalog to be quite good. But then you find a company like New Money Gang, let's say, Mpho sales label, which will have Daliwonga, Mlindo the vocalist, Shasha, Matumane, Mama, have multi-platinum selling artists, like huge artists. Obviously, that label in a financial year would generate way more money than this company would, right? But then over a long period of time, how valuable does one become over the other? Because then this company might, the newer company might be a little younger. So it's going to take long, right? And it's got 5 artists who've maybe got 1 or 2 albums each, right? They're going to exhaust that. And we're going to visit back to one song when we're at a braai, or, oh, it reminds me of this. Or when we hear it in the club, we go back in the car, and when we drive, we play it. We'll go back and visit it, right? But then your catalog needs to have significant relevance to the consumer or the listener. It needs to be part of, people's memories and times and all of that. And it might not be songs from that catalog all the time, because you've only got 10 albums in your arsenal. It's not like all my memories in my life are tied to that. But this company with 13,000 titles, let's say, chances are I could think and have a memory or miss a certain song every single day for the year that they own. You know what I'm saying? And every single day I play this song, that I'm playing 365 songs that they own every day. And I'm not the only person, Then there's like 30 million of us in the country who are playing songs that they own unknowing. And that's where you see the value of catalog. So it depends on literally always, I think, what the owner of the labels, I'm trying to find the right word, what the owner of the label values the most. Do they value the long game, and do they want to build catalog, or do they want to release music that generates revenue right now? Because if you want to create catalog, you're going to sign and sign and sign and sign and release, so you can build the catalog. Then you'll go out and buy more catalog as well. That's also an option. You go out to another record company, you buy their catalog. This company's closing down, they're offering you start building a catalog because you've got access to that. So it's I won't say one over the other, but if you ask me personally, I would see value in the catalog business over time, right? Because maybe I've got a 20-year or 15-year kind of like period or projection of 5 to 10 years on how much I make. But caveat, you will have to sign artists to your label to resuscitate the catalog.
What does resuscitate mean? Sample?
Things like that. You will have to sample it. You will have to, do remixes. You will have to sign fresher artists. So people, when they go and access a Gallo catalog, can then hear more Gallo music. If Gallo's got like 10 hot artists, the hottest of the hottest, when people go back and listen, they hear all other Gallo music and they discover that, and therefore that resuscitates a lot of their catalog. But if they don't have that, it's a big struggle, because you're relying on the publishing side of the business to then allow Mpho and JR, whoever, to sample the music. So now we have to, beg artists to sample the music, or, do remixes and force stuff when that might not be necessarily the way you want to go about things. But you always need to find a way to resuscitate the catalog. And we've seen now that the data has shown that music from, let's say, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, has now, it's easier to resuscitate now, even because of TikTok. So you see the sounds that come out, and someone is doing a sound on a song an SWV song that came out in 1998. Next thing, that song is back on the charts. Next thing, that song is charting, goes gold, whatever, simply from a TikTok sound. So it's now become better to resuscitate. So companies like Gallo would need to, I don't want to say need to, because then it'll sound like I'm telling them what to do. But the suggestion would be to tap into social strategies, subtly, because you don't want it to look like it's something that's paid for. Have a great strategy approach to social, because that'll be a way to resuscitate a lot of your stuff, because we're seeing that. And they've got great catalog, man. I mean, they've got, they've got Mahotela Queens, they've got a lot of catalog. But the music still works. I mean, Melody or whatever, they still got great music. And then you've got younger guys who are building their own catalogs, like New Money Gang, whatever. They're building their own catalogs for the future.
I mean, you've given us a masterclass there, and I think if anybody at Gallo is listening, they need to call you in. But I want to sort of go back to the model of understanding. I mean, you've been in this industry for long. You've seen the different cycles. You've seen people come and make money, people lose money. I want to ask the question in twofold. First one is, you've got $1 billion today. Go into the music industry. How would you make money? I think let's start there. And segueing from that, we can then maybe give some examples of success stories of people that came into the industry. They didn't come in as, I'm an artist. They came in as, I want to make money. I'm a business person, the lawyers, and they made a whole lot of money that people don't know about.
I've got $1 billion today. I'm definitely R1 billion.
We can say dollars.
Oh, thank God. So am I tied down to invest in the African territory, or can I invest globally?
Globally.
I would possibly invest in probably a sub-label of one of the big three.
What is a sub-label?
Like a subsidiary label of one of the big three. So possibly like an Interscope or an RCA Records or an Epic Records or whatever.
What does that mean?
I mean, those are record companies. So Epic Records is a subsidiary of Sony Music, and Interscope
How would you become
is a
a
subsidiary of. So okay, so I need to. Which question do you want me to answer?
Okay, let's maybe take me through.
Okay, so to answer your question, that's what I would do with $1 billion. I think there's great value there. That market has access globally. The US market, their revenue generation potential is exponential. Like, it's unlimited, right? They can keep making money. That machine just keeps making money. And we see it now with Tyler, and, just from a South African perspective, like, it's a machine, right? You look at Chris Brown, you look at Kendrick Lamar, you look at Drake, those guys are signing $300 million like offers and $500 million. How much is the business making? If they can offer you $300 million, they are printing cash. That's my first way. I'd probably look at investing something in there. It doesn't even matter what the investment looks like, but it matters about the return. Another thing is I'd possibly also invest in live. I think live is where it's going to go, because we're seeing a lot of the AI coming into play now, sounding like, you can have an AI to sound like Drake, you can have an AI to sound like Kanye, you can have an AI to sound like whoever. And because of that, I would go more into live, because that's what's going to matter. And that's what we're seeing right now. Hence, we're seeing the Dome that was built by, I think it's by F&B. It's built by Big Concerts and Ticket Pro. I think they're the owners of the venue. You see venues like that. I know. I got a deck like a couple of years ago that landed on my desk about a potential new arena, that they wanted to build in Johannesburg, and you see that, you see a lot of companies going into that, because the live space, whether it's for music concerts, whether it's for basketball, whether it's for sports, whether it's for conferencing or whatever, live space and spaces are going to become more and more popular, because that's the only way you're going to really feel the value, the human connection, right? Because otherwise you can just watch, you can have a AI podcast. This could be an AI podcast, but the minute someone says, you say, I'm coming to Gqeberha, and we're sitting down, we're having that, people want that human connection. And I think with artists, that's the way it is. So I'd also go into live. But with the little change that I have left, because I'm not going to get very far with that, but with the little change I have left, I'd probably also look at tech solutions for like I say, AI in music space. Not necessarily to take away the job of the creative, but to make it easier to use certain elements. I've always wondered, when the log drum came out, I looked into possibly the development, when log drum was a sound that was available on FL, but it wasn't available as a VST or a plugin that could work on many other platforms outside of FL, like production platforms like Logic Pro and Ableton and all of that. And, at some point we looked at possibly creating it as a VST and then or a plugin, and then possibly doing a license with one of the one of the bigger whether you're Cubase or Logic, and one of those guys to license the tool to use it in their production softwares. So I'd possibly look at something in the realm of tech. I mean, I love technology, and I think it's quite important for us to embrace it rather than fight it. And we could find ways for it to move together. But yeah, that's what I would do. Second question is, you're asking me about
the subsidiary of
yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? So a lot of companies do distribution. So if you own an independent company, you will have a distribution deal with another company like a Sony Music or a Warner, one of the major companies. You'll have a distribution with them. Then what then ends up doing, but you only specialize in Baqanga or Oskatamia or Maskandi. You only specialize in that, but you've got the largest number and the largest catalog. What most of these labels would then do is then they would then acquire your business, right? So Sony would then acquire your business as a subsidiary label of Sony to sign Maskandi only. You get what I'm saying? And then, that company would then have its own board or whichever way, or would have a couple of members from the holding company's board or company in their board, whatever, kind of like see things through. So that's what I'm saying. I would invest in something like that, because I've seen that those create a lot of they create a lot of revenue. That's in the US model, so like Interscope or RCA or Epic or, those would be great investments, better than like investing. I think for myself, because I would want to still be or I would possibly even invest in the bigger business, like the holding company, maybe like the Sony or whatever. But I would probably come in at that level. But that's what I was meaning by subsidiary, is that's how it happens 99% of the time.
You've had quite a diverse view on media. From music, you went into television, but more music television with Clash of the Choirs and Idols as well. How was that transition, and did you find that it's different? Is the business of the media space different from music, or is it all the same?
I think it's better than the music business, simply because it's a little bit more structured. There's a little bit more structure. There's a little bit more, it's a little bit more organized, but it's a great business to be in. I love the media business. I mean, we're still in it today. I'm still in it quite actively today as well. So, going into Clash and, dealing with the production companies that are there, all the talent, watching how this big machine, turns with all of these different components, meeting great people. I mean, some of the people that I met there today, I mean, the lady was a producer on that show today, is like one of the executives at MultiChoice, and just seeing those people move, from also like me, from music to maybe media, and they move from, producer level to executive, or they move from talent and actor level to director, even executive in position. So it's a little bit more structured. But also very different beasts. Clash of the Choir is very different to Idols. Idols is an international format, as we know. The format is held by, the format is held by Fremantle, which out of the UK. So it's literally very different. Also, it's Clash of the Choirs. It's also an international format, but I think in terms of execution, it depends to, on the format holders, how the execution should go. So although they're both expensive properties, Idols will have that glam, it'll have that shimmer, it'll have that, So therefore it becomes a very different machine. Idols is it's big, it's a big thing. So being on Idols, and also Idols, I'm a judge, So I got to view it from two different worlds. Idols, I was a judge, and then on Clash, I was a choir master, who won, by the way. With my team from Mpumalanga, yeah. So so it's very two different lenses. But I love the media business, man. I feel like it's a place where we can grow as a business, and it's a place that we've given our attention to and invested a lot of time and resource into being in, and I just want to see, you know, my company grow in that space and really make a footprint for ourselves. But I love the space. It's a great space to be in.
I think as we a lot of people would sort of see you as a founder of the culture or the media space, especially with music in South Africa. And having experienced it, created it, been a part of it, managed it, what do you believe the future looks like? Because now people are saying we're not sure where the media industry or music itself is going. Because before we had structural record labels and people could go big through that. Now we've got TikTok sensations that are now automatically becoming big. We've got Mpho starting, and we're hearing there's a balcony mix, and that's how it's disseminating. They all gather together, and they're wearing Nike. What does the future look like? What do you think? Where is this going? And if somebody's watching and saying, "I need to be focusing on something here," what do you think that future is going to be?
You know, a couple of years ago, I think we were talking about this thing when I went to London to sit with Google. We had a chat about how was Feel Good live sessions doing what it was doing at the time, integrating product and brand on a platform that they were supposed to be selling media on, right? So they were selling pre-roll, they're selling mid-roll, and they're selling end credit, like credit roll, like whatever, but they're selling advertising, right? So it means then as a channel, we're making revenue from the AdSense perspective. We're making revenue from the pre-rolls and the ad rolls that are happening in the content. And we're making revenue from the brand and product integration part. When they're only making revenue on the selling of ads, and and then the conversation was about that, was to for me to speak to them about how this system worked, and or rather how I then created this system that would see great value not only for my platform but also for the talent. And would go on to employ people, and how do we sort of try and replicate or create that strategy for them to roll out on the continent. But why do I say that is because if we don't look at how we innovate and change the future and what future value looks like, we're going to struggle to embrace what the change will become. And I think a lot of the time we do not give the future enough credit. We don't give time value enough credit. And I think we need to do that, because when you go into those meetings and you discuss with people your strategies for the next 8 years or 10 years, or where you see something being 10 years from now and what the industry is going to look like, it's either you're with people who are with you or people who are against you in terms of your vision. And we need to position ourselves to embrace the change. When you are a young artist and you're sitting here and looking like, where's the music going to be? How is the industry going to transform in these many years? Embrace the AI change. Embrace the technology. Don't be opposed, as a creative. With there'll be Lukompos, there'll be spin-offs and subgenres of that. There'll be all other things. But the thing about it is that, like, how do we function in this ecosystem? Because if we struggle to function there, we struggle to take control, we're going to be very vulnerable. And then, guys who know what they're doing are going to create a Cheveshet 2.0, using programming, and using, what I'm saying? And we've never been closer to like living in this alternative world than we are now. They said it years ago, say, oh, we're going to live in this thing, whatever. But we've never been closer than we are right now. With people are having relationships with ChatGPT, so I think my thing is always, regard and respect future value, and don't be opposed to change and learning. I always say I'm a student to the game. If I stop learning, then I stop living, because I continuously want to learn. And again, I do not know what I don't know, right? So for me to be able to gain, the knowledgeability, I have to open myself up to receiving the information. And I think once we're there, and with younger people and young people, and whether, and I say younger people like I'm an old man, as young as I am, I think it's easy for them to, to embrace this than other people have. And the value, I think, will be in that for them, in embracing the technology. I wish guys would embrace the technology. The old record label style, the whatever, we're seeing indies, we're seeing younger guys, people one releasing their music. Guys go into music to have one hit, make R1 million, then venture off and invest in something. And then, like that's how it works. It's going to move quick, and we need to move with it, and if we don't do that, we're going to be lost in it. So I think that's my stance, is that, like, embrace the tech, embrace the change, embrace the innovation, respect and seek future value. That's the long and short.
Thank you so much for coming through and giving such wise words of advice. I think anybody in the industry would really learn a lot from this episode. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.